Good morning. We are going to be reading A Simple Act today by Tyler Jackson. This is a true story, so it is nonfiction. And this is a story from our Savas textbook. So, whenever we're doing something from our Savas textbook, like a short story or poem, it will have the title, it will also have a picture. So, we always want to kind of make inferences or draw conclusions based off of the picture before we read. So I think to myself as a good reader, what are some things I notice in the picture? And I notice, first of all, that there is a woman, maybe middle aged woman, with her arm around a kid, maybe a teenager. I can't quite tell. I say a teenager because he's almost as tall as her, but he still looks pretty young. I also noticed that, like, even just kind of the fashion and the picture itself looks older, like maybe in the 1990s. Um, Another thing I notice is they're standing what looks like, I don't know, perhaps a bridge or like against a city skyline. So I know it's probably somewhere maybe busy. Maybe it's Chicago, maybe it's New York, or like somewhere where there's more skyscrapers, things like that. And the title itself, A Simple Act. It must be something pretty simple. Maybe it's an act of kindness. I don't know, but we're just kind of making inferences and trying to come to conclusions before we start reading. So let's go ahead and read the background. As I read, I'm going to be marking up any signposts that I see or notice, as well as the who, what, where, when, and why. We call those the 5 W's, okay? So we're going to be labeling those as well as again and agains, words of the wiser, aha moments, contrast, contradiction, memory moments, and tough questions. Those are our kind of our reading signposts, our notice and notes, if you remember. So we're going to be labeling both of those things as we read today. So whatever I put on mine, you need to then do the same in your work textbook because these are textbooks that you can write in. So let's go ahead and start with the background. In a big city like New York, thousands of strangers from many different backgrounds cross paths every day, but they rarely stop on the street to get to know each other. When people from very different places make the effort to connect, unexpected friendships can form. Okay, I'm going to see if I have any of the who, what, where, when, why. And I notice right away, New York is a place, so that could be labeled as a where, and that kind of fits in with my inference about the city here in the skyline picture. And it's just talking about how, like, there's many strangers, they don't really stop, kind of like we do in the Midwest where we say hi to people. We're kind of like what they call Iowa nice. In New York, there's so many people, you don't really, it's out of the norm if you were to kind of stop and talk to someone like a stranger. And then I feel like this is kind of the why. When people from very different places make the effort to connect, unexpected friendships can form, right? So I think this right here is like the why of the story, why it's important. And I think we'll find that out as we read. Paragraph 1. It was the first day of September in 1986, and the morning rain had given way to bright sunshine. A successful advertising executive made her way across 56th Street towards Broadway on the west side of Manhattan. A young boy, all of 11 years old and dressed in scruffy clothes, asked for some change for something to eat. Laura Schroff lowered her head and walked on. Manhattan was full of panhandlers, and she hardly even noticed them anymore. Okay, right away I noticed a when. First day, so September 1st, 1986. And so I was right, it was kind of in the late 80s, 90s. That is a when. And then a who would be Laura Schroff. And she is being described up above. She's a successful advertising executive. So she's kind of like this business woman. And I'm going to kind of draw an arrow over to Laura Schroff, okay? She sees an 11-year-old boy. Okay, so that's another who. We don't have a name yet, but I'm wondering if this is maybe Laura and the 11-year-old. Um, Dressed in kind of scruffy clothes, asking for change, she walks on. And I don't know if that makes her heartless or not. It just kind of sounds like in New York, a lot of panhandlers or people who ask for money, right, or food. Doesn't mean they're homeless necessarily. It just means they're in need of assistance. There's so many on the streets of New York that it's not uncommon for people just to walk past. So I don't know if this makes her heartless, but it's just kind of like the norm in New York. So let's just say this is kind of normal. in big cities, which is sad, of course. So normal in big cities. So she just kind of keeps walking. Pause this as you need to, this video, so you can copy these notes in your textbook. Okay, we're going to go on. Paragraph 2. Notice how off to the side it will have the definition of some vocabulary as you read. But something drew Laura back to the boy. She still doesn't know what it is, but she calls this an invisible thread. There's this old Chinese proverb that says an invisible thread connects two people who are destined to meet and influence each other. And if I don't know what influence means, it says to affect someone in an important way. Laura believes she felt that thread. She turned back from the middle of the street and took the boy to lunch. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight or circle invisible thread. And she says this relates back to this Chinese proverb. A proverb is not like a fortune cookie. It is not, it's kind of like wise tale, okay? So she's saying like there's this Chinese proverb that says sometimes there's this thing, this invisible thread that connects people, right? Who are destined to meet and influence each other. So let's underline that and bring the Chinese proverb over to kind of what the proverb says. And she felt that thread. So I feel like this is kind of an aha moment if we think about our signpost. She felt the thread and she turned back and she took the boy to lunch. This is kind of outside of the norm. Usually, if someone wants to help someone, they would maybe bring food to them or give them money. So I would say this is a contradiction because she actually takes him out, right, to lunch. She doesn't just go to McDonald's and drop something off. She actually thinks, I think I'm probably destined to get to know this person. Paragraph 3. The boy lived in a single room in a welfare hotel with his mother and numerous other relatives. It was only 2 blocks away from Laura's home, but it might as well have been a different planet. So, kind of showing how different the neighborhood he lives in is. As they talked over their lunch, Laura learned about the boy's life. She herself had not had an easy childhood, but what she heard shocked her, and before she left, she told him to phone her if he was ever hungry. When she didn't hear from him after several days, she returned to the spot they had met, and there he was, in the same clothes and 2 tight sneakers. That's really sad. Almost a week later. I'm going to put a frowny face. They arranged to meet the next Monday. Okay, so this whole paragraph is kind of background info, we can label it as. I'm kind of bracketing it off and putting it as background information. What do I notice as background information? He lives with a lot of people. He lives in a welfare hotel where the government pays for it. It's very different from where Laura is living now. But what I also notice is like she has not had an easy childhood. And I think this is different from what I thought because, she's a businesswoman and she's successful. So I just figured she's always maybe been rich, but apparently she hasn't. She hasn't had an easy childhood either. The other contradiction, or kind of this weird, she says, telephone me if you're hungry. Well, back in the 1980s, they didn't have a cell phone, and you would have to pay if you wanted to call someone, and that would cost money. Well, if he makes any money that day begging on the street, he's probably going to use it for food. So I'm sure he doesn't call her because any money he makes, he's going to put towards food, not towards a phone call, right? So she does the good thing and checks up on him. Okay, paragraph 4. Every Monday, Laura Schroff and Maurice Mazik, okay, now we have the name for the boy, so let's label it as a who. They had dinner together. Some Mondays they ate at Laura's home, and Maurice discovered a life he had only seen on television. Gradually, Laura became the boy's first role model. She encouraged him, and if you look over here, encouraged is to inspire or offer support, to have dreams about his future, and got involved in his education. Maurice's teacher was perhaps the only other person who believed in him, and she made Laura take a long, hard look at what she was doing. Was she helping Maurice just as a way of helping herself? Could she commit to being there for Maurice even when she didn't feel like it? What kind of damage might it cause Maurice if she were to abandon him after becoming so important to him? Laura thought it through and came to a decision. Okay, light bulb should be going off in your head because here's another signpost. It's a lot of questions that are really hard to answer. So of course, these are all going to be 3 tough questions, right? She has to think to herself, like, am I doing this just to have gratitude for me? Am I going to be able to be there for this kid in the long run? What if I'm not and I abandon him, right? These are some tough questions. I also see it again and again. Monday, 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 right? We have 4 Mondays. These are again and again because it's showing this is like their ritual that they do every Monday now is they eat together. Paragraph 5. The two continued sharing dinner every Monday, and a close bond or a connection formed between them. Laura introduced Maurice to new places, new ideas, and new possibilities. So I see another again and again. New, new, new. Maurice became almost like the child Laura had always wanted. One day she offered to make lunch for Maurice and leave it with her doorman for him to pick up on his way to school. He asked her if she could put the lunch in a brown paper bag because then the other kids would know that someone cared. That's very sweet. Makes me wonder too, like if he lives with a lot of relatives, I wonder if he does live with a mom or if it's just a bunch of distant relatives. Is mom in the picture still? I don't know. We also learned that like Maurice became almost like the child she had always wanted. So that tells us she never was able to have kids, right? But it sounds like she wanted kids. So we don't know if she never had a husband or if she was infertile, but she was never able to have kids. So she treats him like a son, right? Treats him really well. Go ahead and pause if you need to write this down. Paragraph 6. Maurice had never left the city until Laura took him to visit her sister's family on Long Island. So this would be another where? Laura's sister's house. Laura's sister's house. And her memory of the trip is a favorite one. She'd expected Maurice to be amazed by the huge front lawn and even larger backyard. But when I see the word but, I already know a contrast contradiction is coming up. But what amazed him the most was the large dining room table where they all sat down and talked and ate together. He declared he wanted a table like that when he had a family of his own. Only months earlier, Maurice had seriously doubted he would live to be an adult. Okay, so most kids, when they see some kind of wealthier house, they might be attracted to a car in the garage or how nice the lawn looks or how big the house is. But the interesting thing, remember, a contrast contradiction is when a character does something or thinks in a certain way that is unexpected than we expect them to act. So, what attracts him then to the table? And that's what I'm thinking to myself as a reader. Like, why would a kid be so attracted to the dining room table? And I think it's because the table, I was going to say represents, but like it symbolizes, same thing, symbolizes or represents family or a sense of like togetherness. And I don't think he's ever had that. Yes, he lives with a bunch of people in his house, but I think it kind of represents unity, right? When you sit around, I'm thinking of like Thanksgiving is coming up and the holidays. It signifies being together, but also surrounding yourself with food. And we know he doesn't have a lot of either of those. Okay, paragraph 7. Laura and Maurice's relationship lasted, and in 1997, that would be a when, it's a date, right? When, this is when a magazine article, less than 1 page long, was published about it. So, what happened in 1997? A magazine article was published, kind of talking about their unexpected friendship. Laura's friend suggested that she write a book telling about the whole story. It was 10 years before she began writing, and another 3 years before she found a co writer and started seriously getting down to business. To me, that's a contrast contradiction. And I am asking myself, why wait 13 years to tell a story that was fresh in your head? Why, I'm wondering, like, did she not think it was a good enough story? Did she not have enough details at the time? But then she waits 13 years to write the whole thing. That sounds kind of funny to me. But the result of their work was called An Invisible Thread. So this is the title. And what was it named after, you guys? It was named after that Chinese proverb that pulled her to go back and talk to Maurice. And it reached #1 on the New York Times bestsellers. Fun fact, you guys can actually look this up on Amazon and purchase this book if you like. I'm going to purchase it for my classroom. and it is a real book. Paragraph 8, today. So this is coming back to present day. So let's just go ahead and put this under today's background information. Today, Maurice works in construction. He is the first person in his family to earn a paycheck. He has a family of his own, and his children are very fond of their Aunt Lori. So I like how, I'm going to just put a heart around this. Even though they're not blood related, obviously he feels fond enough of her to call her aunt. And if you were to visit the family's apartment, you might notice there is like no couch, but there's a huge dining room table. So he did get that table that he wanted. Some things I notice, his job, he's a construction worker. He was the first to earn a paycheck, and he has his own kids. So that's awesome for Maurice. Paragraph 9. Let's bracket this off. This should be the reflection, kind of like you did in your personal narrative, the reflection paragraph. The writer Ernest Hemingway said, the best way to find out if you can trust someone is to trust them. That sounds like words of the wiser to me. WW, words of the wiser. Over the years, Laura discovered the truth of that statement. She feels that Maurice has given her one of the greatest gifts she has ever had. He repaid her trust by giving her life more meaning than her success at work ever did. He taught her to be grateful for what she has and for the chance to share it. The words of the wiser. So this words of the wiser, the trust, is what Maurice learns. And to be grateful for what you have and share what you have with the world is what Laura learns. Okay, so those are two important takeaways. They each came away with a lesson. The younger person learned how to trust, and it was probably hard for Maurice because he's been abandoned by so many people in his life. And Laura never realized, she grew up in a rough childhood, but now she's a successful businesswoman, that it's important to be grateful for what you have and then share it with others, right? So, really awesome life lessons here. Let's circle this. This is like our LL, our life lesson here that we want to come back to. So with this, we're going to be putting this information in a graphic organizer on Schoology, or if you're in person, we're doing this in our notebook. So stay tuned for the next video on how to do this. And if you didn't catch all the notes, go back and pause your screen so you can get all these annotations down. Because remember, annotations is circling, highlighting, but also writing our thinking in the margins. And we need to get those down in your textbook. So please, 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 if you didn't get some of this, go back in the video and pause it so you can have all of these notes, which are going to be very important for us. All right, stay tuned.